Welcome, everyone. I'm so excited. And what's exciting mostly, I think, for you guys, anybody joining me today for this very first episode, episode 1 of No Man's Land, is that this is going to be dramatically changing throughout the month as we shift this to the studio space in the Jack Pine Center. I have a photography studio there. And in the basement, or not really the basement, it's like a loft studio space, but it's this beautiful atrium in the middle of a walking space. My goal is to actually be doing live broadcasts out of there in the public so that when I am not at home, remote homeschooling my children, that I have the opportunity to do the podcast in a more serious fashion. But working the myriad of jobs that I do, I had to absolutely make this a priority. And already some familiar faces joining me in the chat room. And I'm so very excited because those of you joining me, you may have heard me on the Situation Room. You may have heard me on Intrepid Radio. I'm not sure where you have heard me. Actually, be sure and comment or let me know. But if you're anything like me, I don't know, maybe we're somewhat similar. That's why we're sharing this space. The stress of the world has been kind of heavy lately, and trying to find the middle ground is kind of difficult. Trying to know how to cooperate, how to communicate, and how to come to truth, knowing what to do, how to navigate the uncertainty around us, the chaos around us. Because when you turn on the television or mainstream media, there is a struggle. And then so for me, I go and I listen to podcasts, right? Or I go and I tune in online and I decide, I really like Joe Rogan, but if I want to listen to far left or far right, everything in between, you either are over here or you're over here. People ask, did you get vaccinated or didn't you? Did you vote red or did you vote blue? And I find myself in an interesting position because I am a woman, because I am a white woman, right? Because I am married to a military person. My family are very military. My formal education with law enforcement and with social services, that integration of service, having a family that's biracial, that is mixed culturally, that is mixed ethnically, racially as well, where we have Native American, we have Irish, we have this, we have that. We have so much of a great history of migration, colonization, all these really big words that people like to use for a space of victimhood. And I can, in a certain space, empathize because I'm not necessarily allowed to proclaim anything in particular, right? When you're a little bit of this and you're a little bit of that, somewhere down the line, you become someone who is either guilty of appropriation or you just don't get it, you just don't understand. Or you might even be finding yourself in a weird space where someone tells me that I'm a cracker or a snowflake and that nothing I say matters. Now, working in social services, being someone who's an advocate for speaking up for those who are oftentimes quite vulnerable and who need help speaking up, right? In a legal field, we don't all understand the jargon. And the government is quite separated from us these days. It's really big. And I get why some people fear their police. They are quite susceptible to fear mongering, and there's a lot of it going on out there. So if you're just trying to hear the news or navigate it or understand it or see things in a little bit of a different way, that's kind of what I want to offer and what I hope to give to you. And I hope that you guys will join me every day, Monday through Thursday here at noon for what I hope to be mostly live. Some of them may not be because I might be working. Again, crisis intervention or doing something with the photography studio, portrait photography or documenting. Now, I am in Minnesota. So I want to start with, depending on what news you may have turned on or heard first today, in Minnesota, there's a lot going on. And if you are in America, even at all, you woke up to, I hate to say it, but a lot of shootings. Now, keep in mind, there's a lot of shootings going on all the time, but what's going on in the news really, and what things might we want to really be prioritizing? One thing is absolutely for certain, that is that if you want to be the change you want to see, that's going to be taking initiative. Yes, I'm a little nervous doing a podcast that's politically heated. Yes, I understand I will continue to get hate mail and trolls, but I think it's extremely important for people to be courageous. And if you find that you have an experience or something worth sharing, a perspective worth giving, information, if your intention is not meant to hurt, your intention is to help, then we must band together in that space. And so that is what I am about. And I want to be able to provide a middle ground for people, mothers even, right? Because I've got two small boys, white boys, that apparently are the most evil things on the planet. And I refuse to let them believe that. So things that we see indoctrinated in the education system, it applies to me directly. Being someone who's an educator myself, it applies to me directly. Just this past year, I was removed from the Twin Cities social workers community because even though I spent a lot of time there on their forums and integrating different perspectives, I told them that I was not willing to take culturally diverse continuing education credits that mandated I take an additional 10 minutes out of a client's time to apologize for my whiteness. I'm not going to do that. I don't feel like it is something that is applicable to the goal. And so if our goal is to not be racist, our goal is to be equal, our goal is to be forward and kind of unified in a different way, it's not going to be found in me supporting something that says I only have to do something because of the color of my skin. In fact, I think that is quite discriminatory, and I don't think that stuff's okay. So I'm probably going to stand up against it, and you're likely going to hear me. It's not intended to be a Karen, because of course, any white woman in middle age that says anything against, I guess, the grain, I can be called that as well. But again, my intention is never to complain. But my intention with this podcast is for an hour to just kind of talk the news about things that are going on. And again, hopefully have an open banter that is allowing cooperative thought. So in that, I have a great many mentors that I look to and sources that I work with. And I think information is helpful. Right? It may be something that makes us, oh no, I hate to hear that. I hate to hear that. But if we take this moment and go, okay, I'm going to go check the news and we know it's full of crap, brace yourself. So here in Minnesota, the Chauvin trial. This is a really big deal. And I want to kind of give you guys a little bit of my experience, having just in the last few years graduated from the Minnesota law enforcement program, having worked directly with Minneapolis police, having worked with their integrated programs with the youth, having used them as mentors throughout the post-training program. Chauvin is well known throughout Minneapolis as being kind of an asshole. And I think that that's why he obviously did not take the stand. He pled the fifth. He has a really good defense. His defense actually is from Minnesota and knows a lot of our laws and how some of those murder laws, those manslaughter laws, they get broken down into subtitles that are really specific, really unique. For me, my master's degree is in forensic psychology and specifically in psychopathy and assessment. So we're talking about the assessment of somebody, their competency, their culpability. This is why Minnesota is so unique, because in our state, we break it down into these little subtitles. You got to look at it and it may or may not apply. This is going to be very important in due process and making sure if someone is absolutely certain of or if there's reasonable doubt of. And over the weekend, we've had some pretty interesting things happen. So though the defense are doing their closing arguments and promising hopefully a quick verdict, we know that Maxine Walters from California. So this is somebody who I think it's important that people understand. And I'm going to probably hit on this a few times, but as far as the law goes, if you're someone who is a voted on or someone who's supposed to be representing the masses, I would like to think that, and what people want when they're screaming for justice, is that the law does not think that it's above the law, and that somebody who is a state representative or someone that they are actually indeed going to have to abide by the laws that they put in place, or that if you're, the leader of Black Lives Matter, that you would want to apply your money to that community which you serve. It's why a lot of police officers actually usually have to live in the jurisdiction that they serve. And I find that's kind of one of those Al Capone loopholes that had the prosecution been a little bit better, that I believe that he lived in Egan or Edina, which is not depending on how the Minneapolis thing was going to be working. That's kind of an interesting thing. But anyway, it's going to be the details, as some of the people in the chat say. And it is absolutely about the details. So I want to just mention again that we have, Maxine Walters, who, guys, man, maybe you're a younger generation and you really dig Sublime and you're like, April 1992, where were you when the riots, Rodney King, all of these different spaces? This is someone who's been, it's like the Biden deja vu. They have been in office for a very long time. In fact, for decades. And is actually well known to show up like Sharpton. Boop. They just pop there like a bold marker. And you can see them doing a certain thing, influencing a certain way, speaking a certain language, and they should be very, very, very careful. And we would like to think that the law applies to them. But of course, elected officials are absolutely not to incite, nor are they to be involved even with protesters, Section 3 of the 14th Amendment. But apparently those rules don't apply to Maxine, and that's okay, because she likes to think that the demographic, which is mostly the Black community, and surprise, guys, if you're not from or in Minnesota, or you've not been able to see through Unicorn Riots or other outlets kind of what the actual riots look like, it's a pretty biracial crowd. It's not a lot of mostly Black community. It's actually a lot of white allies. You hear a lot of put the white allies on the front. There's a lot of screaming and kind of use of this. There's a lot of indigenous people dancing around with their drum circles. There's a lot. Minneapolis is very, very, very diverse, especially right down in and around the Floyd Square or the areas where people are protesting by the government center. These are areas that's like hot. I mean, you've got like Little Somalia. You've got areas and communities that are known for like the community demographic of being a certain ethnic group. And of course, this isn't meant to be racial profiling. This is natural human behavior and psychology, which I might add, I had a graduate degree in. So I'm not saying this because you're trying to be discriminatory. This is something that you do as a natural survival behavior, and that you're going to probably do in a survival state, which we're all in under a terrorist regime or under a fear-mongering state, which the media is pushing, right? It's not just segregation. It's a pushing of a panic space, an adrenaline response, a fight or flight. When you do this, it's like walking to the lunchroom on the first day of school, and you're scared and you're nervous and you think, ooh. And hi, guys in the chat room. Thanks for joining me. This is really important because you're going to go sit down at a table of one of two types. You're going to sit down either next to the group of kids that look just like you because you're going to be familiar, maybe predictable about what they do, handshake or not. They kind of look like me. I can expect the unexpected, and you feel safer. You feel safer with that is a reflection of yourself. Or you might just be narcissistic and kind of strange and maybe in a traumatic abused situation at home, and you do the equal and opposite reaction. You go sit at the table of people who look the absolute opposite to you, and you just engulf yourself in that, and you do a desensitization. Go Marines. It's usually those people, those fire signs that are doing that. Yeah, I'll be the first people to go to Mars. Woo! They will take that risk and sit at that table and be the Julia Stiles of the movie, okay, and put themselves in that position, knowing that they want to understand, right? Make your friend and your enemy your best friend, kind of a thing. And I think that's important, to keep your friends close and your enemies very far away. But a lot of ours are already here. They're already crossing borders left and right, and we actually let them in. They're not fleeing as people migrant on the backs of coyotes, though that's happening in the thousands. Instead, it's going to be people that we just willingly let in by permission and said, I accept, on something online. There's a lot of IT things happening in the news, guys. If you have been a victim to Wi-Fi struggles or outages online in the younger generation and on the TikTok community and then the Snapchat community, there are conspiracies of we're under solar flares and alien. Now there are aliens, not to be disguised, but in this space, we're having a lot of 5G. We're having a lot of shifts. We're having a lot of airspace politics, believe it or not, a lot of grab-assing for resources, water, air, and land. Can you guess who some of those big players are? Gates and Bezos and some of those people. But anyway, let's get back to Minnesota here where I am at. And so we have Maxine Walters flying in with her private jet, right? Or her private security, and she comes out in her outfit and she pulls her mask down, and the audacity, actually, I almost wonder the ignorance. I almost wonder the blind ego to say, after, of course, telling people to harass our recent president, encouraging that perhaps there was an inciting at the Capitol, right? And this just months ago, being very aware that you should be, if you are in a position of responsibility, you should be careful with your language. Absolutely, Maxine, you should. So when you say confrontational, to be confrontational, well, what happens? What happens, Maxine, if the Chauvin verdict doesn't go like people want? I think they should be, quote, confrontational and fight for justice, unquote. Now, in my YouTube feed, you will see I do occult and magic and neurolinguistic programming classes and education. And this is really, really, really interesting because I talked about the word justice and what that implies. And to put that with to fight for, it's kind of almost an oxymoron. It's a really interesting thing. If you don't want to get punched back, you don't punch someone. And just to be just and to be fair. This law enforcement, if you say that it's inherently racist and then expect it to be one thing, and so therefore you know that it's not, and therefore you say that if it isn't what you expect it to be, that you know that it is, that you're calling it, and then you are inciting to fight for something you know that you cannot get, that is the dangling of a carrot, ma'am. That is the dangling of a carrot, and that, I believe, is extremely dangerous and insightful, and I think that these people should be held accountable, and I think that maybe we need to not have a president not be responsible for draining the swamp. What the F? That we as the people need to remember that our government should fear us, that we are the people, and to hold these members accountable. You're not allowed to do that. And though our Constitution is shaking and quaking, it does still hold true in those spaces. And you're out! Out of there. You're out of there. You've done it once, you've done it twice, you've done it 3 times. And you're going to see that often with me. I'm a mom of 2 boys, so we do the baseball rule. And I think that's pretty important. So you guys, if you're not familiar with the Maxine Waters thing, I'm going to do more split screens and sharing. YouTube is kind of watching me pretty closely because I don't have a large following yet. I have to be held accountable to very strict Veritas things. I have to be very, very, very careful with what I share and what can be copyrighted. But I do want to tell you that there have been certain news outlets that cover this very well and ones that don't. And it needs to be known from me to you, from Minnesota, that shortly thereafter, she leaves and goes back to California, which is burning. And I don't appreciate that. I don't appreciate that as someone who lives and works in Minnesota and has clients in and out of Minneapolis that are in crisis. I don't appreciate that. And it's something that I intend to take a few moments out of my day and call the people in legislation and say, how can I help get this process going to impeach these people in office? So next is, and I want to share again the importance of the name of this show, No Man's Land, here Monday through Thursday at noon, because I think the strike of midnight, right? This is the time when something happens. And it's also when we take that moment of pause, and it gives a certain credence and a discernment and a recognized moment of time to take time to think about something. And I have family members who think very differently than myself. I have individuals in all sorts of ranges and realms that think very differently than me. And I actually like that. I like having that flexibility and that ability to go into those spaces. So I'm not here to slander one side or the other. And I would hope that you not do the same to me. And so I bring up the very scary and shaky word that I have been talking and working on for years. Those of you who followed me for a long time on social media have seen me in and around the We Are Change, doing protests in and around this topic, especially since becoming a mother 9 years ago. But vaccines. How do you feel about vaccines? And let us know what you think about the mandates in and around your area. Now, this is another place where it's not so much about the vaccine itself as the ripple in the water, so to speak, of how this is affecting us. So someone in the chat room shares, I actually got detention because of my first day in a new high school for going to sit and eat my lunch on the stairs in the gym, 20 feet or so from the lunchroom. You know, I used to sit Lunch was very hard for me too. Lunch was always really hard for me because I didn't always fit in. So I can empathize with that. And again, I'm seeing so many people showing up in the chat room from Minnesota. Welcome. Be sure and let us know where you're at and where you're coming from. And I see David, nice to see you. But the vaccine, some people screaming, no, call it what it is, gene therapy. Oh, no, no. This is a very, very, very important topic to me specifically as a mother, but also as a woman who has had to deal with kind of the lack of options in our medical community for a very long time. So it started with polycystic ovarian disease. Then it moved into being someone who's a rape victim. If you're familiar with Kansas City and how they handle their rape kits, they're not necessarily well known for doing it in the most efficient of manners. And not always feeling like you're heard, being able to cope and carry that burden and empathize with other people going through the process and make sure to try and help them find justice, though you know you haven't, and to not allow that to be a bias, and to work in CASA, court appointed special advocacy. This is very important. These types of organizations that help speak for the unspoken and the underdogs and the vulnerable. And for me in this space, this is where vaccines actually came in, because I remember watching the movie, if you're a Jude Law fan, Gattaca, and these movies that were like sci-fi, right? My sister was a big Star Trek fan. And so tuning into these shows, this was not unfamiliar terrain for me to consider AI and integration of our devices. It was not nanotechnology was something that 15 years ago I was looking in how to invest in. Vaccines and vaccine awareness, immunocompromised issues, being someone working in psychology, neuropsychology, later going into heavy metals, getting ovarian cancer, then doing the American Cancer Research Center, opposed to traditional medicine, then going the holistic route, seeing the absolute diverse ways, traveling the world, how a different country manages their healthcare, how America manages its sick, how it profits off of its sick. Ugh. Johnson and Johnson. Ugh. My mother poisoned by her birth control. Ugh. Horrible byproducts of, IUDs. And myself having an aneurysm, having adverse reactions to what we've been told is supposed to be our medicine. Now, I now work in neurolinguistic programming, and the definition of a word and to know what words you're using and what they mean is vital. And so I don't call that medicine. And when you're holding a small child, one that's your own, and we hate to be biased, right? To discriminate someone that we love versus someone that we don't. This is a big psychological thing as far as value proximity goes, which is a whole nother discussion. But there's an importance to community, which we don't often have anymore, right? And being aware that I had seen children foam at the mouth and just immediately have seizures. I had seen these videos where parents were showing me the before and after, the slow speech, the neurological disorders, the high levels of autism, the issues in never getting published, never getting heard. In fact, the opposite. Some real political spaces that began to be quite concerning, made me quite skeptical. In fact, when I moved to Minneapolis, I worked with all sorts of people, some of which were parts of major conspiracies. And these things weren't necessarily conspiracies, right? It's only a conspiracy until it's not. And it's very important, I think, that people are aware that if we question a vaccine, it doesn't mean that we're anti-vaccine or pro-vaccine. Now, firstly, one thing we can stop doing is stop liking people's pictures and stop sharing the pictures of your vaccine. I don't care. I don't want, and we shouldn't want to advocate for the pressure that it is to share our medical information so freely and so openly. That should be a number one concern. We should be just as concerned about sharing the faces of our children online because of the child pornography that's allowed to go on social media, but the censorship of just discussing some of these other very important things, like the vaccine being banned. I mean, banned. I mean, not allowed, banned in other countries. They don't do it. They're not, no. And states in our nation lining up and pausing, Minnesota being one of them. The Johnson and Johnson. What? a company known for giving babies cancerous, carcinogenic talcum powders and bath washes that have like quieted case after 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 case of dead babies. What? One of the biggest pharmaceutical sellout companies of all time ever that jumped into the vaccine game when they realized there's absolutely no liability. What? There's not? No. Not under the Emergency Authorization Act. There's not actually. You're relieved of all of your liability. Your distributor, your manufacturer, anybody. You can actually seize out right there in your car, like kids are doing all over on campuses, and no one's held accountable at all. What? Yeah. Well, that doesn't seem okay. Yeah, the NIH didn't think so either. Years and years and years ago when it separated itself from Fauci. What? We have a like private committee that is all about ethics called the NIH that like helps manage things that make sure what we're doing is ethical. And when they saw Fauci doing what he was doing with SARS vaccines and said, this is no longer ethical, there's a conflict of interest, we can't be working with you anymore. And he said, okay, fine. And then moved all of his stuff elsewhere, that happened. Yes. And that person today, Monday, announces, despite trial concerns, despite the CDC playing the hokey pokey on 3 feet, 6 feet, 3 feet, 6 feet, no mask, 1 mask, 2 masks, no masks, this kind of stuff. And as a parent, the health of our children is extremely important. Man, if you want to piss somebody off, go after their children. I think this is quite interesting timing. Of course, if you've watched the astrological reports, you would know that it isn't. It's no coincidence at all, in fact. But this conflict of interest, strike one, a one size fits all. I don't think that people quite understand just, man, I don't feel you when you are spooning out Tylenol, you look at the dosage. Some of the best philosophers of our time, the greatest thinkers and wisest speakers have said, medicine and poison is in the dosage. Now, there's truth to that. There's absolute truth to that, down to the alchemy of it. And so to think that an 8-month-old baby or a 16-month-old child or an infant fetus inside of a pregnant mother would get the same size dose as an elderly person or this person or that person, that it's a one size fits all, isn't alarming. That it's distributed in a way that is cohesive to eugenics, that it's given to the most vulnerable populations first. If that isn't red flag number 2. That the creator of it is integrated into this, this epidemiologist, if he is even that anymore. The lack of liability, the adverse reactions, there is reasons that we should be able to say, hey, I'd like to wait. I'd like to make sure that there are trials. I'd like to make sure that there's liability. I'd like to make sure that if in any way, shape, or form I am immunocompromised, which under a pandemic, you say people could be walking around asymptomatic, symptomatic. We don't know. Who doesn't know? The test, which you made, he actually patented that test. He did. Yeah. No, whenever he broke away from the NIH and said, fuck it, I don't have to be ethical now because all my shit's in Wuhan, China. He was like, you know what? Let's patent all this shit too. And so that way, when we spread the jet, well, they're only going to be able to use that test. I'll make so much money. Oh, sorry. We're on air. Okay, go back. What was that I'm supposed to say? Oh, yes. Don't do that or do that. What? Don't listen to this person. This person. Don't listen to this person. At least I'm just my opinion. Again, this is kind of one of those. Today, Mr. Fauci is launching an email media campaign, a toolkit, if you will, an email media toolkit to go out to the younger generation, because there seems to be a disconnect because the younger generation might be smart. They might be onto you. They may get this. That's encouraging influencers, clergy, teachers, these kinds of people people, positions of power, to reach out to those that you might know that are 16 and older and get the shot. It's cool, man. It's appalling. It's appalling the fact that there's a lack of liability. It's appalling the fact that there's a lack of trials. It's appalling that there's a one size fits all and no adjustment for it. It's appalling that there's a major situations with adverse side effects. And just we should be able to ask why. We should just be able to say, hey, I'd like to wait. Or if you have to for your job, that you're not feeling pressured to have to show your sticker, or that you should have to show this, because guess what? It doesn't matter. Even if you have your little sticker or your thing, how are we supposed to track that? We can forge that. It's not showing anything. It's not indicating anything. All it does is say, oh, well, I have it at my doctor's office. Let me get it. It's like my car insurance officer. Hold on. Let me find it. And they say, okay, well, here, just give me that and I'll look. You want that person to have access to all of your medical information, because guess what? If you are considered to be in a particular space of distress or emotionally compromised, which of course everybody falls under that umbrella when in a pandemic and space of high stress, with riots outside, oh my goodness, have you sought out therapy? Are you on any extra gabapentin? Have you upped your dose of Prozac or Paxil or any of your things? Because if you've actually sought out help, medical help, and people at one point really wanted, like with that HIPAA, the goal, of course, under all sorts of different Patriot Act, crazy conspiracy, horrible misuses of power in that different space as well. But the goal, of course, was just to protect our personal privacy and protect our medical information, because people want to say it's none of your business. However, if you want police to be able to show up and know that person's medical history and that they're actually schizophrenic, then that stuff cannot be protected. There's a certain purgatory that you have to be willing to share that information. There's a certain space where liberty and privilege and concern and this kind of dance has to happen. But of course, it doesn't happen at the expense of people's health. It does not, should not. And when we look at the trials with animals, guys, the animals did not fend well. What? Yeah, some of the trials are coming out. Why? Do you think major first world countries, well, America's first world, actually we're not considered first world anymore. We're majority of our people are poverty. Poverty. Really? Yes. Yes. It's horrific. And this is very, very, very important. And so you guys, this is that demographic is not, anyway, it's just very important that I think people do their research and they understand that if you are asking, oh, did you get vaccinated? That's really an invasion of personal privacy. There's a lot of individuals out there that get triggered by those questions because they really understand that you don't ask someone their credit score. You don't ask them if they're married. You don't ask how many people they've slept with. There's just a certain, space that you don't ask, and definitely don't use it as like a voting sticker, like hashtag. It's a misuse of something that is right in front of our faces, and it's not meant to be satire, but it almost looks that way. And it's at the expense of people's lives, people shaking, people having tardive dyskinesia for the rest of their life. Things that is not a medicine. That is not a medicine. That is not a medicine. I repeat, if it could possibly kill you, and I know we laugh about the pharmaceutical commercials, which by the way used to be illegal. To be able to go on social media and pander to someone a medicine, a drug, that which you're going to profit from, by the way, used to be illegal. It used to be illegal. As a Girl Scout, I used to get bonus points for bringing in the Joe Camel rip outs, which actually worked double for me because my mom was a Camel smoker. So those advertisements also had some of the points on them, and she'd accumulate those for like beer koozies. But I'd also get Girl Scout tags because that was the 80s and 90s. But there was a space where I think that we were doing the right thing, saying, you know what, let's not advertise these things. Let's not advertise things that are dramatically dangerous to our health, because we understand the importance of the vulnerable community and how that, we probably should just be careful of that. But not anymore, people. No one cares. Next on the news. I just want to share something. So again, if we woke up today, a lot of shootings. It's very sad. Again, I shared the NLP on things that we call a misfortunate event or things that are tragedies, things that are sad. This is really important to be aware of. Now, Austin, Texas, there is, and what I want to show here is the narrative, how important this is. There's a slant that cops are bad and that they're all just out to shoot you. And of course, that's ridiculous. So in this shooting in Austin, Texas, and much like the situation too with the mass shooting of the recent younger male who he was there, he had a sex addiction and was going after, the Asian massage parlors under the assumption, thank you, Hollywood, that he would get a happy ending. And when they said no, after hearing this no and that no, he began. Again, someone says, well, he was just having a bad day. When we say a mental health day and someone says they were having a bad day, we understand he had a therapist and an active therapist and that he was speaking out to somebody what exactly was happening. And he was illustrating and communicating to him what was going on. And lest us not make fun of it, because this is somebody who's mentally ill, right? And we want to give are you not playing the victim anymore? Should we not victimize certain people, certain vulnerable people, or do they not matter anymore? Should we just give it to all the old people and children and not care anymore? Oh, okay. Because I don't necessarily play the pity party game. That's not something that I find beneficial to me. So you're not going to see me do it ever, if ever, very, very, very often. And the media slants this recent Austin, Texas shooting. Now, it is a Black man. So he's a Black American, and he's the kind of age of someone that you might expect being a mass shooter, mass, because we say 3 people were shot. It was a domestic. And you look at the situation and we go, he's an armed Black man on the run with a weapon, having shot people he knows and that he loves. This is a dangerous person. However, that's not what the news shares. And man, you would think with this opportunity, he's a Black guy, right? He's out with a gun shooting people like a video game that this would, but no, this is not the narrative anymore. So now it's very important that we mention that he was a recent detective. So this is someone who has police experience, right? He has served his community and he's worked. Again, I think it's such a shame how we just throw veterans and people of service under the bus, just teachers, just throw them under the bus, guys. They just don't matter at all. And that to me is mind boggling, because that really is the root of the problem. When people ask like, well, where do we go? How do we start fixing it? It's going to be showing respect to people who take the jobs of service, teachers, not overpaying, not underpaying, honoring, right? Medical doctors, they have a certain amount of money because they are being lobbied to, not because we want to pay them all this money, or not because what they do requires that much money. It's because somebody's giving them a hand job in the back and paying them out of their trunk and they're going on some cruises. In this kind of space, these people, if they're just doing their skilled trade, may not make that much money. Skilled trade people make a lot of money, usually because they're not working that long. Their body's going to give out. So there's this certain barter with time and ability and skill and money, go doggy coin, is important right now as we shift in the age of Aquarius, because a lot of stuff is going to move. But this detective, obviously, he's been a member of service, so he's probably struggling with mental illness. Now, going into this as a forensic case manager, you're telling me that this is an active shooter. He knows how to use a gun. He probably shot 3 times or, deployed all of the bullets in his weapon and was very accurate, which is sad. So I imagine that those people died. I don't know the whole story yet. But Austin, Texas person, it's very important. They mentioned that he's this bad cop. He's a bad cop. See, even when they're not on duty, they're shooting their loved ones. Shame. Shame on that news. Clickbait bullshit. Because he's probably struggling with PTSD. There's probably riots in Texas right now. It's probably half Minnesota's fault. It's probably half Maxine Walters' fault. It's these people that want to incite things and then go back home to their mansion on the hill and not take any responsibility. People that protest with, mostly peaceful, partly violent. No. When I show up to work as a forensic case manager, even if you're mostly peaceful, partly violent, I plan for the partly violent. That's what you do. That's common sense. So unfortunately, the one bad apple ruining the bunch, you have to be responsible for your people. And you go, well, we can't be. And then you look and you wonder why police, a group of people, a demographic of people, made of people, a group of people made of people, where there's a few bad ones doing something bad or having accidents, humans, don't act surprised. Don't be an idiot. Don't expect perfection. Utopias don't exist. Okay. It's really, 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 if you've not ever been an officer or had to serve or have done a ride along, some people ask, like, well, what can I do? I have a niece or nephew, or I know somebody who's just very anti-police. They're just fuck the police, fuck 12. They're just this or that. They're more than a prof fan. They're losing it. They've gone out of control. Man, there's some people I know that say, if a cop's life matters more than a black person's matter, then I just can't be friends with you. Well, what if I tell you a black person can also be a cop? Is your mind going to blow up? It's just ridiculous. Just these absolutely ridiculous. It's ridiculous speech. Absolutely stupid. And I think you're dumb. And that's dumb. And you're dumb. And I won't be shy to call you so. But in this Daunte Wright, which is, again, happening in Minnesota, Brooklyn Center, this area, just known to be kind of ghetto, right? When we were house hunting, if you're looking for a house, 2-bedroom, 3-bedroom, 2-bath house, you're going to be looking at one that's about $175,000 and the crime rate, and you're not going to want your kids to probably go to school in that area. It's not the best area. It's outside of Minneapolis. If you're from Kansas City, it's the equivalent of the bad parts of Gladstone, right? If you're from Kansas, it's the bad parts of Crime Dot. If you're from Georgia, it's probably the bad parts of, I don't know, close to Ferguson if you're in St. Louis. I mean, the different cities that I've been to or lived in and out of, there's certain areas, these areas that you just want to, and this is a biracial person. I don't know if you guys have watched the news, but the slant that he is a black saint, he's a biracial young man. So in the mental health community, if you're biracial, I mean, I can empathize with that. People just want to call me white. Anything I do is just, man, I can't be Irish. I can't celebrate Native American. I can't celebrate any of my ethnicities because I don't look like them. I understand that. I wonder if he gets accepted into the black community, or if he's, the Oreo, or I wonder what he's been berated as. And you look back to his history. This is a young man who's 20, who's unmarried, who's got a baby mama that hates him and who says, well, he won't be here either. And, she's obviously cares deeply. And it's so sad. The victim of this is going to be his unfathered child. Again, and no one cares in that space. And there's some responsibility held to this mother, who again is a white woman. If it matters, which it doesn't. But if it does, because you're screaming a certain race only matters, or this or that, then to say Daunte is a black man, and that's the only thing that matters, is that police keep shooting innocent black people. 1, they're not innocent, and 2, he's not technically black. Man, and I know people don't want to hear that because that doesn't fit the narrative, but if you say that, they're going to be confused when they watch the news, and they're going to say, who is this kind of larger white woman with really cute cheeks crying about losing her son? Has there been another shooting I didn't know about? Well, there's a lot of shootings you don't know about. A lot of shootings you don't know about. Like a ton of shootings you don't know about. Like shootings at Floyd Square, where it shows people dancing, doing nothing but peaceful protesting. Actually, some really amazing young people working in and out of the community with like big brothers, big sisters, shot dead in the last month. Go look it up in the news. No one cares. That didn't make headlines because it wasn't the certain kind of gunman that you want. It didn't really matter that much. So the mental health thing matters. And with the Austin, Texas thing, when I look at the Stop Asian Hate and how suddenly you look at a community of Asians who have been begotten to racial discrimination since World War II. I mean, this is not a culture that complains, and they're known to be tolerant, and they're known to have been misinterpreted as vulnerable because of their quiet nature. Just like those young Asian women assumed to give hand jobs and happy endings because of the culture of geishas that spend and denote honor to women that subscribe to a lifetime of learning, a sex trade. The Western culture, we have said that sexualizing your body is illegal, that you're not allowed to do that. You can't do that. America actually has really unique and kind of strange laws about what you're allowed to do and not do with your body. I am particularly of the belief that I would like the government to keep its nose out of my goddamn business and ovaries. Okay? Especially if I'm paying ridiculous income tax. Which, by the way, I thought was really interesting. There were some live feeds today on some questions happening in and around taxes for businesses, private businesses, and PPs and reparation acts given back for the 2020 plans. And they're trying to hold the Treasury accountable. And it might be a surprise to people that when you look at the IRS, the Internal Revenue Service, the federal bureaus and things like that, some people are actually surprised to learn that those aren't actually, it's like they're not affiliated with that government. So that's kind of interesting. Just really interesting. Just kind of weird things that you might want to, check out if you're not familiar with that. But another kind of race card that I just want to mention that this is important, and I'm not sure where you are listening from. Be sure and comment below where you are at. But to stretch outside of Minnesota, again, where I'm here from, and to stretch outside of Texas, where I know there's been a lot of shootings, but you jump over to Chicago, you jump over to New York. These are also areas not immune to the same hatefulness we're seeing spread across what is quite interesting to say. Every state is very different. I would say every state has its own culture, and yet we're seeing this same thing play out, which doesn't make a lot of sense. It would almost have to be scripted to be that way. But anyway, in Asia, New York Police Department cop attacked by a disturbed Hispanic man. Well, man, if that doesn't fit the narrative. And I've got nothing to lose, he says, as he loses control. Man, Hispanic bad, Asian victim, cop attacked. They had to put the word cop attacked because it was the cop who was actually attacked. But the way that their language was in the headlines, I read it and I thought, oh, how interesting. The language is very important, guys, and this is marketing 101, baby. And sometimes I got to kind of give them a shout out, but it's a very specific narrative. And again, not all Hispanics are disturbed. Mental illness is kind of a cross-cultural thing. And Asian individuals being attacked, it actually typically, if you're looking at statistics, it happens in masses in metropolitan areas, predominantly by young Black youth. And when you look at the demographics of that youth for recidivism, it's whether or not they have males in the home or they have a support system in their recovery and probation that's going to hold them accountable to a disciplined routine. Guess what? They don't have. You won't be surprised. And it just, again, be aware of how this plays out. Mental health is very important. The things that we can do to hold each other accountable, so important. Be able to be a good parent and expect others to be a good parent. When you see somebody having a tantrum out in public and you just, support the parent, support and give love. Be aware. Don't just hold your phone up and laugh or neglect and walk away. Be aware and be involved, I think, is really important. When someone says it's important that you talk the talk and walk the walk, it means that you have to be brazen enough to put yourself out there and take the risk if you believe strongly enough in it, which is why I'm here Monday through Thursday from now on at noon, because I have to go through these headlines with you guys and share just this little bit of perspective. These are my children going to school every day, having to listen to some of this, and we get to control this. We control it. Do not confuse the arm of power here. And we are going to lose it very soon, very quickly. We're already slightly losing it. Project Veritas, some of the censorship. Those of you, I'll give you an example as far as censorship goes. Think about Black Lives Matter. I don't know if you guys remember kind of the,
Did she buy 3 houses or 4?
the leader of Black Lives Matter brings in more than $90 million in last year's revenue. However, due to the opaqueness of their private business, they are no longer going to be held accountable to the lack of where salaries go. You guys, we won't say that. Do you have experience doing voice work and getting paid to do advertisements? I do. I work for numerous companies doing voice work. And so neurolinguistic programming is a business. You guys, listen to this. Baloney. Listen to it. It's baloney. $90 million and didn't give any back. Moved to Topanga, California, where you don't want anybody bothering you. Well, my. That's about as ridiculous as taking all of the amazing and beautiful Black faces off of the nostalgic pieces of things that we consider comfort items. And we associate, is that racial to call Aunt Jemima a comfort item? Please. Well, you know what they replaced it with? Captain Crunch? Just a colonial white man. Just put that on there. Leave Kentucky Fried Chicken alone, but take all the Black faces off of everything in marketing and make sure no one notices. By the way, that won't be news. And you want to play the race card. I cannot believe it. I won't believe it. And we see past it and it's baloney. Okay. Anyway, something that came up recently I thought was kind of cool. What do we do, Sarah? How do we make this better? There's really great things I think that happen in immediate intention spaces. For example, certain policies that were like the hero pay, allowing certain businesses to provide hero pay. Now, I know in Minneapolis, there's a lot of reparations happening under Omar and dismantling of police. Be sure that all the traffic stops, which by the way, are sometimes the most violent, where people get the most damage done and the most destruction happens. And it's the most unsafe because you're in an unplanned environment with traffic swarming by. There's so much you cannot control. You're looking into someone's environment. It's just, don't even get me started on this. Poor. It's like Marxism, right? Good in theory, bad in application, guys. You have to be able to have long-term strategic abilities to think rationally and objectively, and also include the human element of error and emotion and account for it, which is why we want policies and policing to not be empathetic. You don't want, police should just show up with tissues and Kleenexes and wipe your ass and tell you everything's going to be okay. Like, I just feel like people would shoot people less if they just, did that. No. Have you ever been on a ride along? Ever? Anyway, it's not how people work, unfortunately. It's a really nice thought. And the hero pay for businesses like Kroger's, who are these businesses, they're kind of national chains, franchises, I believe. It's a franchise. Not quite big enough to be in the upper echelon of like, the Waltons or things like this, Bezos or Amazon. But they say, okay, for employees that are involved in working in the pandemic, we're going to involve the hero pay, $4 more an hour. And it's good intention, right? But then your business starts to struggle because your income to out, and with a pandemic, people buying less, and the way money works, supply and demand, you start seeing, you're not making as much money. You're not making as much money. Not making as much money. And so what happens is you start going under and you have to start closing some of your stores, and you look at your business and you go, what stores are we going to close? Well, this one over here has really high crime. It looks like it's in one of those areas. It's probably going to be rioted here pretty soon. Is it a mostly Black community, like outside of Minneapolis, or is it Indianapolis, or is it one of these many? It is. Oh, and they want to take police away too? Oh, they do? Oh. Let's close those stores down first. Oh. Yeah. That just makes sense. That's just business. That's smart business. Because in the other, rich neighborhoods, not white, but rich, these neighborhoods, we can sell the same bar of soap for $18. No one will know the difference, and there's not any crime there. There's not enough theft. There's not as much theft. It's so much better. Like, we'll just make more money that way. You know what I mean? Oh, well, that makes sense. Oh, well, let's do that. Okay, let's do that. And then guess what? And then you have eugenics kind of spinning its wheels again, happening because the intentions were to pay more people to work more. The people who were showing up to work, of course, despite the fact they could have stayed home and gotten paid on unemployment, which most people did in those situations. And the businesses just kind of ate themselves. And this cannibalism is not a oops. Oh my God. It happened over there? Oh no, it happened over there too? Oh, it's happening over there? Oh no. If we do that over here, I bet it happens over here too. I bet you're right. Oh my gosh, guys. The art of war is not a new thing. And some of these, and I will say, again, not to be red or blue, but in some of the more democratic cities, we're really struggling with some of these, like the reparations that I'll say it, they're quite racist. Now, speaking of language, something that I want people to pay attention to, I know I got into some hot water for wearing my No Lives Matter shirt, which was Jason from horror movies, because I work in the paranormal too. Yes, I know, right? How horrific of me. I do appreciate when it comes to coping mechanisms, humor. It's a very powerful tool. Black guns matter. That's right. On, I think, Joe Rogan. You're also seeing on some of the major news outlets even getting some airtime, which is fantastic. This particular movement, which is going into areas where there are guns, where you're never going to be able to get rid of guns, where guess what? Doesn't matter how many things and restrictions you put on guns. All it does is make people turn an eyebrow and get even more confused. And that's ridiculous. And people are not going to part with their Second Amendment. Don't even dare try and do it. But going into spaces and teaching about gun safety, going in and helping make sure that people understand what automatic, semi-automatic, a safety is, how to use it, the importance of how to register your guns, not register your guns, where to get your guns. These things matter because it should be open information. We should know where these things are, not on a registry, not on a list of, because never have I ever, that's a fun game to play. Never have I ever seen a government or a authority in power take a list of the people who are gun owners and know that to be a good thing. It just isn't. I don't think it is. It never will be. And it just, it takes you on a train to a shower. You guys, it's just not a good thing. So not Black Lives Matter, but Black Guns Matter. Which, by the way, Breonna Taylor's mom recently in the news doing a I told you so, and of course was censored this weekend. All of her Facebook posts went down. Also, the houses and the helipads down. All those things censored and taken down. So when people go, oh, well, I didn't hear that, because if your algorithm didn't give that to you in the last 4 days when it happened, you're no longer going to find it. Oh, well, that's interesting. Well, isn't it? However, I know a lot of people are going to be going out. They're going to be doing a mostly peaceful protest. Again, laughable. Out in the on behalf of Floyd, which again, guys, we really do need to be holding people accountable. I don't know if you guys saw some of that footage. I got the joy of watching that trial, every minute of it happening right down in the same community I used to work in and have clients currently in. This is extremely important. Watching and knowing these police officers in person, knowing that, yes, police officers and police departments can be corrupt, knowing that this is an old veteran officer who's not having any of it. And man, Floyd being high on drugs, being somebody who's in and out of the recovery, being under some pretty poor influence, it looks like, his snitch friends and non-snitch pleading the fifth friends. And, you know, shame on them for taking advantage of the young cashiers at that space that's known to be on the corner right there at that same spot in the ghetto spots where you always get Western Union on a Friday in an afternoon at 3 o'clock, where it took him 30 minutes to buy cigarettes. Give me a break. And you're watching this go down, and it's unfortunate. But guys, there is, and I hope that you see it, there is an absolute power and control to every decision you make. Every decision you make when you wake up each and every morning can be to serve others, to share love, to educate, or it can be to make dumb decisions. And if you make a dumb decision after dumb decision, after dumb decision, after dumb decision, and then take a bunch of drugs and then follow dumb people and make another dumb decision, and then you get mixed up with dumb officers because you're on the frequency of doing dumb, and then dumb stuff happens to you, there is a certain momentum of responsibility, which is why when someone says, listen, I can't, we can't, of course it's not justified. Of course it's not.
but it's also not intentional. And so you've got to be able to meet in the middle. And if you're not going to meet in the middle, then this isn't going to work. So it's just not going to happen. Because someone in the chat said, I'd be interested to hear your opinion on violence in the media, especially directed at children. This is a topic all in itself, which I might actually do and share on for tomorrow, because that is a great topic. Now, for me, my dissertation was dealing with the addiction of anger, the addiction of violence, and whether or not this is something that is desensitized. If you're a Quentin Tarantino fan, if you've watched the behind the scenes and interviews with people, if you are someone in the military who's done, force stop or particular trainings of desensitization, you understand Abu Ghraib, you understand the standard operating procedures, you understand the difference between an interview and an interrogation, all of this type of stuff. Children are so important. They're so susceptible. They're so open. So being able to provide the equal and opposite narrative to what's being pushed at them is so, so important. And it's happening in schools. So again, if you as a parent are not as active as your teacher of your child, you figure that person, if your kid's going to school or not, or if they're on Zoom or whatever, how many hours of face-to-face is that person getting with your child? Or at least giving them attention that they feel is more attention than you're giving them as you sit on your phone or make dinner or do laundry or whatever things you do have to do as a parent. That there's going to be a prioritization of that information. And also children in their natural development start to prioritize their peers and people outside of their family group to be an access of information for them. And it starts to become more important to them for a short period of time. And you almost have to work extra hard against that momentum to influence just as equally and help condition your child into a space of like equal, moderate, and comfortable. So we're always hopefully trying to do that. And if we're not even aware of what our child is thinking or what's going on in the classroom, some of the silver linings to the pandemic, of course, for those of us who became homeschool teachers against our will. And for example, though, some of the violence against children, yes, we had shootings this weekend in Minneapolis. Yes, we had a BCA officer open fire on a hijacking. Yes, we had continued riots for people trying to hold up George Floyd and Daunte Wright as saints. Meanwhile, Jocelyn, a 7-year-old, shot dead in Chicago this weekend, in line at the drive-thru, waiting to get probably her Happy Meal and her toy. And the fact that she is just a 7-year-old living in Chicago, but having to deal with some of this ridiculous crossfire, collateral damage of people that cannot be held accountable, that want to get rid of police because they don't think that they should have any kind of punishment for their action, that it's okay to stomp and throw a tantrum and light things on fire because you didn't get what you wanted. This, of course, is not acceptable behavior. This is not okay. I do not condone this. This is not cool. And anytime that my children see this happening in the places that we used to walk to and from the park to go get a smoothie up in Northeast Minneapolis, and now we can't go there because it's littered with homeless people, trash, needles, and rioters, I say, look at what dumb people have done. Isn't it sad? Isn't it unfortunate? What can we do? Hold people accountable is one thing. And I don't know how many people in your local community died or got shot this weekend, or where the community is showing its focus. But there are people that die every day. It's very sad. There are people that die every day at the hands of police. They're usually criminals. But should children be dying because of stray bullets in cities where people don't think that police should be? Because, well, who are the leaders of? Wait a minute, this happened where? In Chicago, where on average there are 24 people getting shot a week? Oh, one more person. Chicago, where people drown, where bodies drown. 860 people already dead this year. Tell me, who matters? Wake up. Who's holding that city accountable? Who's in charge of Chicago? Oh, here, let me see. Lori Lightfoot. We call her, some people refer to her as Beetlejuice. That's a horrible thing to say. She does look kind of that way though in the lounge scene. This is ridiculous. And someone who is to be held accountable for their metropolis, if this is what's going, just like some of our Waltz and some of our leaders, I use my Dana Carvey fingers, in Minnesota, they're trash. They're not doing their job well, clearly. They need to be doing a better job. They need help. Maybe they need to delegate. They need more. They need more advice. They need more people that don't agree with what they're doing to speak up and not be afraid, and not to necessarily threaten, but to just say, hey, man, this isn't okay with me, and we need to change this, and let's do that. It's very, very, very important. And instead, when you give any constructive criticism to Lori Lightfoot, any suggestions at all to the Chicago mayor, any suggestions that she might be held accountable in any way, shape, or form, her recent rebuttals online on Twitter were saying that basically anyone that criticizes her is homophobic, misogynistic, and racist. I mean, these are the words that we circle if you want to be held accountable and found guilty of a hate crime, right? Racist? What? How is that? What? Misogynistic? Ugh. Who even is thinking about sex, relations, commitment, marriage, or partnership at all when they look at you, Lori Lightfoot? I'm talking about your city on fire. I'm talking about your city on fire. Ugh. Do your job. We're not talking about you or me. We're talking about the position that you're holding. Stop taking everything so personally. It's not about you. It's not about you. It's about your ability or lack thereof, your capacity or lack thereof, your culpability or lack thereof, and what's going on directly around you because of your influence. And if you aren't allowing any constructive criticism, if you are censoring and swatting down with torches that people are racist just because they speak out against you, that is a dictatorship. Okay, that's violent. That is an infringement. That's dangerous. That's destructive. Shame on you. Shame on you. Shame on you. And it has absolutely nothing to do with the way you look. It has to do with your character. And that's shame. So anyway, you can hear all the stuff going on around me. We live right off the way from a base. So there's all sorts of stuff going on with the deployment of stuff down into the city. I want here as we finish up, because I know we've reached top of the hour, and I promise that I'll keep it to an hour every day here, Monday through Thursday at noon. But I want you to be aware of the deliberate and deceptive way that media is using us, guys, and to be very aware and therefore tag all of your friends and join me here with all of the news that you'd like to share. We know CNN is obviously a little biased and ridiculous. You watch the news these days, it looks like a Monty Python skit. And we are, too, the rest of the world, a Monty Python skit indeed. It's almost like an Onion article or satire. But now ABC, and I want to share this with you because it's absolutely ridiculous and it cannot get any more ridiculous. And it moves into some spaces that we are going to be talking about this week with the awareness of sexual objectification, the inequality. Gosh, you're so worried about the vaccine and what it can do and this and that, or not worried. But what about birth control? What about this? What about that? What about? You're not talking about justice. You're not talking about fairness, equality, or transparency. Let's get it straight. You're talking about profit, who you can profit off of, and the way of the ID 2020 eugenics program. But ABC flubed up this weekend, and an interesting thing that went down, it was a media coverage of a Navy event. So the Navy media said to have all these big head honchos there. And in fact, they did. They came, they saw, they conquered. And the $1 billion investment of this new vessel and the event thereof went without a hitch, I guess. But however, media got caught up in the after for being held accountable for fake editing, putting out there this ridiculous news, because what had happened was they planned twerkers. That's right. A group of women to come out in tights, leotards, where you can see their camel toes, to twerk. I'm talking, I would not even share it if I did the split screen to share it. You can go and see it on Skynet, or you can go on ABC if they haven't censored themselves yet, for the recent coverage of this weekend's Navy media event for these twerk dancers who at first were like, listen, you're showing all these big head honchos reacting to us, and they didn't even watch us. And it's true. It's kind of looking, they cut and edited. What? The news cuts and edited its clips? Do they cut and edit their clips? Yeah, they were actually showing edits from what was supposed to be Duante Wright's riots that were actually the George Floyd from last year, but only people from Minnesota noticed it. So yeah, they do that all the time. It's called B-roll. So since journalism is actually being censored, and a lot of people out on the streets aren't being allowed, and all the media is being cornered up in little squares before things happen, a lot of it is fake B-roll or different B-roll. It's like time traveling B-roll. It's actually not unethical. It happens all the time. Oh, really? Interesting. Anyway, so they did that. They got caught. The twerk dancers were really upset because it made them look like people didn't like them. But actually, which probably was what happened, the main people were like, so what's on the schedule for today? And someone's like, oh, we have the National Twerk Girls. They're called the Shakin' Coochie Girls or whatever their name was. I don't know what it was. We shake our ass girls. We also have caviar on a cracker, sir. And that starts at 1. And the guy was like, okay. So yes to the caviar and the cracker, no to the twerkers, because that's fucking ridiculous. Okay. We're not going to, people's wives and people don't want to see that. Nobody wants to be associated with that. This is the military where we all had to like dress in layers. We don't want to watch people shaking their ass. Okay. We want to get to the strip club now and not have to not, no, that's stupid. Don't do that. And so they didn't, and they didn't do that, and they didn't watch the show, but ABC edited it like they watched the show. And then the girls got mad. And then ABC was like, listen, they didn't want to see your stupid show. And then the twerkers went, well, ABC, you and your coverage is so stupid that the way you took pictures of us dancing from down instead of up showed our crotch more than it should have. And we feel sexually objectified and feel as though the way that you shot us and edited the imagery makes us look as though we're sluttier than we are, and we feel shamed. This cannot be real. This cannot be real. I kid you not. I kid you not. I kid you not. I kid you not. The twerking girls wearing leotards said that it showed their crotchal region. Does anybody know what the point of twerking is? Can anybody tell me what the point of twerking is? I mean, it's basically if you want to appreciate a good ass and get a free show, and you don't want to go and have Pornhub or YouPorn on your browser because you don't want to have someone press Control H on your ass. And so you go and watch twerking videos and call it a workout, which it is a workout. It's actually hard to do. I appreciate it. It's mostly in the ankles. People have been doing hula for years. For ancient eons, women have been shaking thy ass cheeks for attention. What? Yes, but they also did it with class, a thing called integrity, where they dangled the said cleavage carrot until they got the men in the privacy of the back room so that they could whisper little secrets in their ear. It was called power. It was called strategy. It was called clever. It was called class. We don't have that anymore. None of us. We don't have any of it. And they should feel shamed. Shame on you. Anyway. We're going to finish up with it a little weird. Get weird. And I know that dancing is associated with sensual attraction, and as it should be, seduction is a very powerful tool. And I think it being misused is going too far, and it's going to end up finding its way into a place where, again, the medicine or the poison is in the dosage. So guys, discernment, plain sight, Snowden, some recent interviews lately with the crazy Russell Brand. I know he's gone from weird to weirder, but has recently been talking about the great switch of control that perhaps with the Snowden interviews of being aware of Russia, moving into the Ukraine, mass surveillance, Big Brother, fusion centers, the NSA, things that are happening, things that are moving in and around, the packing of the courts, things that are happening as shooter over here, shooter over there, twerking over here, shooter over there, shooter over there, hate me here, right over there, burn, burn, burn. There's actually all that stuff happening in legislation right on the backside. And we need to be very careful because we do have Russia and China. We have particular powers throughout the world making strategic moves as well. So we would be remiss not to pay attention to other powers, other people, and different perspectives. And Edward Snowden, believe it or not, some people call him a terrorist, some people call him a saint. Regardless of what absolute you might label him as, he does have an interesting perspective and good information to possibly share. So listen, and I would absolutely recommend, there's one that's just a few days old. Go and listen to him, just kind of talk about the language of conspiracy, being aware of what you want to put out for surveillance, but psychologically how surveillance affects us And man, you guys, this anonymity, this hate, this ability to not know what you know is really, really important. And I'll leave you lastly with something happening here, even in my own hometown. So I know I moved 100 miles north out of Minneapolis as I was being held at gunpoint, and the kids are coming home with no shoes, and the city was burning, and things were happening right outside of our window. Black Lives Matter was protesting, and bullets were bouncing off of my kids' bedroom inside. And I just couldn't do it anymore, despite my absolute dreams of working at the BCA and doing forensic psychology and working out of MSP and having that job and having the seniority and doing it, having the education. Your family is most important. And it is hard on the ego to make these decisions. Is it something I wanted to do? Of course not. I miss my falafels. I miss my sushi at Masu. I miss all the privileges of living in a city where you do have culturally diverse neighborhoods. My kids could go over here and see this and go over here and see that. And we respected people of all sorts of walks of life. And we saw paraplegic homeless men, and we saw paraplegic veterans. We saw people over here. We saw people over there of all walks of life. But instead, we moved to a community 100 miles north where it's a little bit less diverse. You're not going to find anything shy of a Wendy's. I'm definitely not going to get much good Mexican food up here. And it's a struggle. But you know what? It is not without its problems. And so parents have come together in a Parents United committee to talk about even the effects of critical race theory here. And this is very important. We understand that it is kind of becoming a blowback. So for those parents or people listening, I want you to take this as an opportunity Monday. How can you help? Well, I want you to be encouraged to share love in your community. If you have any outreach to a parent or a teacher near you, let them know that yes, even the elite, posh, and privileged, it has stretched to them as well. So our discourse and all of our disgruntled hate, it has permeated those in a privileged space of money, because it's not about race, it's about money. And the posh Manhattan, New York Cityans are withdrawing their kids from private schools, and teachers are resigning from their big salaries because they are not willing to indoctrinate children. They are not willing to have a certain standard put on place on just children, that they should have to sit at this table because they are this color, or that they do not get to attend a graduation with their friends or their peers because they are not the same skin tone, to say that, you know what, you're going to have to apologize for something you absolutely did not do. And instead of looking forward and shaking hands and sharing and learning how to hold each other accountable and respectful and how to talk with each other, that instead we're going to censor you. Finally, people in their right mind, even the rich, have come to a place of what real wake up is. It's not woke. It's buck woke. It's come back to a place of reality. It's come back to the real world. And that is not a space that is open to critical race theory or anything of the likes thereof. It is bullshit. And when people talk about systematic racism, this is a perfect example of it. This is absolutely it. Indoctrinating children, having someone like Fauci, who's absolutely a conflict of interest, coming in and telling you that it's cool to get a shot when he directly profits off of this, is baloney. It's absolutely the same kind of abuse we're seeing of the people that hold, no offense, Biden lovers, because I am not going to declare one president over the other. I support he who is in office if they are capable. But again, talk about somebody who's known to see someone from a distance and say, hey, I think that they're probably competent or not. This is elderly abuse. This is someone who's struggling with dementia. This is someone who's struggling to complete a sentence. This is someone who has to have scripts. This is not somebody who is in a position of power and able to control or navigate a strategic decision or a board meeting or a committee or something that is going to be like a treaty. Man, when you look at someone like Putin, who just recently over this weekend, when asked by an interviewer, do you have interest in taking over the world? He laughed and said, of course I do. Who doesn't? This is extremely important, guys. This is really, really important. All of these things are happening in and around us as we are getting a dangled racist carrot in the media. And I just hope that you will stay strong. I hope that you will know, yes, of course, I'll get hate mail. I may or may not have even lost a few friends this year who said that if I didn't vote a certain way, I just couldn't be friends with them. Or if I didn't hold a certain sign, I just couldn't be friends with them. Or if I didn't go out and riot, I just couldn't be friends with them. And here's the deal, guys. I am for peace. I am for equality. I am not for a utopia because I don't believe in such things, but I am also for a place where everyone can find a middle ground. The no man's land exists. Even in a place of war, you are able to blow a whistle, have a moment of pause, reprieve, respect one another as humans at the very least, because in our COVID relief package, we've got some information coming our way, guys, and it's not going to be conspiracy for too long when we see aliens in the news. This is not satire or Onion news articles any less than that ABC news twerking thing is. I'm not kidding. Alien crafts, UFOs, Galactic Federation talks. What? Israeli board meetings. What? Things censored out of American news. What? That's right. All sorts of really strange, weird things. And conspiracy theorists, man, they're doing even stranger things. They're going to the Google map and looking at the Suez Canal from the Google satellites to see if anything is spelled out in the cargo trains. And there may or may not be. It's hard to say. Is it real? Is it not? Is it planned? Is it not? We don't know. But what we do know is that, again, everything is a conspiracy until it's not. And the most important thing you can do is listen openly, but also speak openly. Do not be quieted. Do not be shunned. Do not be shut up. And definitely, if you know in your heart of hearts and that you know you're not out with bad intentions, you're not throwing bricks or cans of soup for your family, but that you are there for actual peace. You're actually somewhere to support a cause. You're there to serve. Then I'm originally from Missouri. So I say, show me. And no man's land is what I hope to do with you guys. So send me your questions, send me your thoughts. Definitely send me the news where you're at. Let me know what's going on. And I will be here joining you guys tomorrow at noon. I'll be in the chat watching. And you guys, thank you so much for tuning in. Don't forget to tag, share your friends. You guys will be seeing this grow hopefully very quickly, very fast as things change throughout the month. And if you yourself have a podcast, reach out, let me know. Let's collaborate. Let's interview each other and see what perspectives we can share, because that's what it's about. It's a middle ground. It's a middle space. It's the ability to walk out, take risk, and listen. It's a no man's land for sure. And you're not alone in it. We are here together, you guys, and I hope to see you tomorrow. So until then.